All right. Well, God bless everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And it's a real privilege and a thrill to go through these records in Genesis. We've been at it for a number of weeks now. And you can, if you're interested in listening to them, they're on they're on a website, which if you look at the emails that I send out every Thursday at the bottom, it'll give you the links if you happen to want to catch up with either our Thursday night teachings or our Saturday night our Sunday morning teachings that John do. You can catch up on those. So tonight we're going to it's Monday, December. It's not no, it's not Monday. That's when I did my notes. It's Thursday, and we're going to get into Genesis 24, a wife for Isaac. And last week we completed the record on Abraham purchasing his burial property for his wife Sarah, who passed away. And do you remember what the name of that property was called? If you, I know we're all on mute, but if you said Machpelah, you were right. And Machpelah, of course, means large cave. And it looked like Abraham was thinking in terms of eventually having other people, which was a common deal where they were buried together. And we'll be talking about next week, we'll be looking at Abraham's death and Ishmael and a lot of other cool things next week. So tonight we move on with Isaac finding a wife. So let's open your apps or your Bibles, whatever you use tonight. We're going to take a look at Genesis chapter 24. And it's a fairly long chapter, but I think we'll be able to move right through it. And I'm using the REV, and I utilize the REV commentary and other sources to put these teachings together. So tonight we're going to be in chapter 24, verse 1. Now, Abraham was old and well advanced in years, and Yahweh had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the senior one in his house, who was in charge of all that he had. And we all know that Abraham was a wealthy man, had a lot of stuff. So this man had a lot of responsibility, senior one, probably been faithful for a lot of years. And so, please put your hand under my thigh, and I will have you swear by Yahweh, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live. But you are to go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac. Now, this is a big deal because Abraham knows that Isaac is going to be in the line to the Messiah. And he knows this, and he doesn't want a Canaanite, which tend to be have ungodly gods. You know, they have other gods, idols, and stuff like that. So he wants him to go back to his land. Now, if you remember what we said earlier, that he was from Ur, and he landed in Haran with his father Terah and his brothers. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So the land of Abraham's birth would have been north around Haran, and that's where his relatives would have lived, the ones he left behind. He also makes a point that God said, I will give you this land to your seed. And Isaac, of course, is his seed. That's why he wants him to go back to Haran. And as their custom was, they marry relatives. And he knew there's some good people there, and so he sent him back. Now, this servant is not named, but he is called the senior servant. So we'll go on with the record here. And in verse 5, the servant said to him, what if the woman is not willing to follow me to this land? Should I then take your son back to the land that you have come out from? So he's getting into the nitty-gritty and details with Abraham because he was just asked to swear an oath. And so he wants to make sure he understands what Abraham wants. But Abraham said to him, make sure that you don't take my son back there again. So that's clear now. Yahweh, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, back in Haran, and who has spoken to me, and who has sworn to me, saying, I will give this land to your seed. He himself will send his angel before you, so you can take a wife for my son there. So we're getting into more details. Um, So the servant put his hand. So he does this stuff before he makes the oath. That is a wise person. You don't make an oath or a promise until you know the details, right? You don't say yes and then say, what did you want me to do? Because as we know, it's better not to vow a vow than vow a vow and not do it because you thought, oh, that's not a good idea. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his Lord and swore to him concerning the matter. Now, this is interesting. This is they a couple of times they do this swearing with the thigh business, and you can look into the REV if you want to find some more of the things that pertain to this that Shainite thinks might be appropriate, but I'm going to leave that up to you. Another time it was between, which I'll get into a little bit later on, Joseph and Jacob, and an oath made that the body would be taken out of Egypt back to the promised land. We'll get into that a little bit later. So let's move on. Verse 10. The servant took 10 camels of his Lord's camels and departed, having all kinds of good things of his Lord's with him. So he arose and went to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. Now, Nahor, remember him? Nahor was one of the brothers of Abraham. And so the city, we think maybe was named after him. I don't know. We don't know for sure. But he's going to go up to this place. And it didn't give all the details, but we know just from studying traveling, especially when you've got a rich guy, Abraham was very wealthy, and you know he's going to send all kinds of stuff. It says all kinds of good things. He's got 10 camels. So it's not going to be just one servant, 10 camels and a lot of good things, right? And we'll find this out later on that there were servants. Didn't say how many, but they would have traveled for safety to get to where they're going. The trip is going to be about 400 miles. So it's going to be a long trip. And so later we'll see that there are men involved. It'll tell us. It won't tell us how many. And the camels are very important to bring Isaac's wife back. So he's pre-thinking it. This is a wise man. So not only does he have things to take up there, but the wife's going to come back, and she's not going to come alone. They have servants, they have people that take care of them, so she's going to have her entourage. So I want to take a moment now and take a look at this place that we're talking about, because this Aram Naharaim is only used here in the Bible. And it's along the river or the land within the river, or more literally, between two rivers. That's what those words mean. And the two rivers up there are the Euphrates and the Tigris. So let's take a look at this map and we'll get a better idea of what we're looking at. First of all, this is the map of Haran. And this is the newly discovered and now believed to be the that Abraham came out of. They used to think it was down here. And who knows, maybe it is down here, but there's a lot of evidence that it could be here. And it kind of makes sense when you think about how he got to where he was going, that he wouldn't go up to Haran first before traveling. So it looks like he came from into Haran. This is where Abraham was from, and this is where he left his relatives because God had said just to take him and Sarah, and it ends up, for whatever reason, Lot went too. So that's gives you an idea, and you can see down here the Dead Sea, and it doesn't, you can't see the Sea of Galilee here, but you can see the distance. It's all the way up here past Syria and up here. So now let's take a closer look at this particular place here that's called Aram Naharaim. And there's the dot. This is Nahor. And you can see this is the Euphrates, this long one here. And you can see it's in the bend of the Euphrates, which keeps flowing here, and then this is the Tigris. So this means between two rivers, and there it is, between two rivers. And that gives you an idea where they're going from way down here in southern part of Canaan, all the way up here. So this is the great bend of the Euphrates. Okay, let's go back to Genesis, and we're in chapter 11, I think, or verse 11. Okay. And he made the camels. So he gets there, all of a sudden they're there, doesn't tell us about the details of the travel, but he rose and went to this place, to the city of Nahor, which I just showed you. And he made the camels to kneel down outside the city by the water well at evening, the time when the women go out to draw water. Now, this is interesting. We've read the Samaritan that was at the well, and this was probably around midday, and she went because she had a checkered past, and the other people probably didn't want her around. Normally they go out in the morning because it's cool, but the custom here is they would go out in the evening to draw water for the evening meal. So the women would go out in the evening, oftentimes young women, and they go out to draw water. And it's kind of interesting too that he made the camels to kneel down. So I'm going to share with you something that I've shown you guys before. Let me see if I put it in the right spot. Yeah. Okay. Here, okay, Carolyn and Doug, you may be familiar with this. Here we are in the Bible lands, and there's a camel. And this is how they kneel him down. And this guy was really nice to his camel. He had a nice mat there. And plus he had a little step stool. And of course he's selling rides. And of course I could not pass this, I had to give this a shot. Right?
I was a chicken.
You were a chicken, right, Carolyn? Now you can hear Gail Ackerman in the background there too. So that was a real great experience, very inexpensive, and it was a lot of fun. So that was common. The camels are really tall and big, so it's common to make them kneel down. If they have cargo, of course, that's going to make it easier to take their cargo off. If they have passengers, also easier access here. Now, let's move in. We're going to get into some interesting things here. And this is the senior servant. He's there at the well. He's at the town of Nahor. The camels are kneeled down, and he's going to pray. And he said, "O Yahweh, the God of my Lord Abraham, please let it happen for me this day and deal faithfully with my Lord Abraham." Now, this is actually the first recorded specific prayer for guidance in the Bible. It could have been, sometimes we don't hear the whole prayer, but God wants us to know what he wants us to know. And this prayer was direct to Yahweh, and it gave credit to Abraham, who would have taught his servant. Abraham would have taught his servant about God and taught him how to pray. And it was spontaneous prayer, specific. It looks like it's from the heart. And it was for what he needed. So it's a good example to us. Now we know from James 5:16, you don't have to turn there, but the prayers of a righteous person is very powerful and it's effective. And this was, as we're going to see, God heard the prayer and answered it. And the word, let's see, go on. And this faithfully is interesting because it's translated from a Hebrew word that not only talks about being faithful, but it also talks about relationship, to deal faithfully with my Lord Abraham. And as we've gone through Genesis, God and Abraham talked often. And we can see why he was called the friend of God. And they had quite a relationship. And God asked Abraham to do all these wild things. The covenant of circumcision. Go sacrifice your son. Even before then, leave your homeland, get going. I'll tell you where I want you to go when you go. So Abraham was pretty used to God being, uh, talking to him. And of course, he showed up there with him before Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. Ate dinner with Abraham. I mean, this is quite a relationship, a wonderful relationship, kind of relationship that we should aspire to have. One that's close, one that knows God wants that kind of intimacy. This really shows a wonderful picture of God and his creation, the people that he loves. So the servant is praying and he's bringing up some of these things to ask them to deal faithful because God had made a covenant, right? And so now he's looking for a wife for his son Isaac. Behold, he's telling God, look, behold, I'm standing by the spring of water. And a spring of water, this is that well, and they're normally outside of the cities because, there's a lot of traffic, a lot of dust, and water is rare and extremely important. And so they're outside the city, and he's standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. And so this is the prayer. He says, let it come to pass that the girl to whom I will say, please let down your water jug that I may drink. Now, why would he say let down your water jug? Well, the common practice was that they would have a 2 or 3 gallon jug and they might have it slung over their shoulder, or as you've often seen, it could be right on their heads, as they often carry things on their heads or on some other device. And so so that's why it says let it down. And she responds. So here we are. Let's see. And she responds, and so she lets down this water, and so this jug, and she says, "Drink." And wait, now she hasn't done it yet. He said, "Let it come to pass that the girl to whom I say." So he's making this prayer. So he's saying this is what he wants. He's praying for. He wants to see. When he says, please let down your water jug that I may drink, she should respond, drink, and I will also give your camels a drink. Let her be the one you have appointed for your servant, Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown faithfulness to my Lord. What a wonderful prayer. Very clear what it's going to take for him to understand that she's the right one. This is a big deal. This is a great prayer. And this is what's going on here now. So now here we go. Let's get into the next verses here. All right. Now in verse 15, before he had finished speaking, how's that for timing? Before he had finished speaking the prayer, look, behold, Rebekah, who was born of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her water jug on her shoulders. So he's just finishing up the prayer, and here we go. So he's got this test, this thing that he'll know, and this test is that she would have him, she would say, drink, and I will also give your camels a drink. Now we also got camels there. We don't know, it's a 400-mile trip. We don't know how long ago it was when they drank water, but these, I understand from what I've read, is camels can drink up to 30 gallons at a time and probably take them 10, 15, 20 minutes. And there's 10 of them. So all we know that this water is stored in the hop. I'm sure you guys know that, and they can go for a long period between drinks. Now, if we say that Rebecca's water jug was 2 or 3 gallons, that's fairly heavy. If you're going to walk all the way out of the city into the city, you can't have a 5 or 10 gallon jug. Men will have trouble carrying 2 5-gallon buckets of water. So it's got to be something that she can handle. And she would have to make it over. Figure this out. If you do the math, she would have had to make over 100 trips from the well to the troughs to water 10 camels if they were drinking their maximum amount of 30 gallons each. Now, it could have been less, but that could have been what it was. We don't know for sure, but it would have been quite a task. And this would show that this person had a beautiful heart and would be willing to help a stranger from out of town and then offer water to the camels. This would be quite a job. Let's continue. So she comes out. She's born at Bethuel. We talked about that. She comes out with her water jug on her shoulder. Next verse, 16. The girl was very beautiful. That's a plus. She's very beautiful in appearance, a virgin. No man had known her. She must have been very young, as that was the case. We know about the time of Jesus Christ, they married young. We also know that Isaac is 40, though, so things were a little bit different back there. We'll learn that he was 40. So we don't know how old she was. And she went down to the spring and filled her water jug and came up. So here she comes. The servant spots her. She's very beautiful. She walks on down to the spring, comes up, and the servant ran to meet her. And he says, please give me a sip, a little water from your jug. So he's being very gracious. Oh, can I have just a little bit? Just a little sip. And she says, what does she say? Drink, my lord. There's the word. That's what he was after. She quickly let down her water jug to her hand and gave him a drink, not a sip, gave him a drink. And when she had finished giving him a drink, well, look what she says. I will also draw water for your camels until they are finished drinking. What a young lady. What a woman. Here you got this stranger here. He's got 10 camels, got some men with him. And she just has such a heart of giving and hospitality. This really speaks highly of Rebecca. And next verse 20. And she quickly emptied her water jug into the watering trough. And, it makes sense. They would have troughs that were there because animals would need to be watered. And she quickly emptied her water jug in the watering trough. So, they didn't drink all 2 to 3 gallons, the men and the servant didn't. So she dumps it. This is smart. She dumps the rest of it in the trough and runs back to the well. She ran back to the well and drew for all the camels. And the man kept watching her, remaining silent. So the servant just watching to know if God had made his journey successful or not. And it sure looks like he has. And now we're in verse 22. And when the camels finished drinking, the man took a gold ring of a half shekel weight. So I checked out what a shekel is as far as weight, and it's less than a half ounce. So I'm thinking, and then when I checked out the weight, like a quarter, U.S. quarter, it would take about 2 quarters to weigh about a half shekel. So for what that's worth, he gives her a gold ring and 2 bracelets weighing 10 shekels each. So you can multiply that out of gold for her wrists. And it's common. I've learned that it's common that people, the women, they wore rings in their noses. They all had long hair and you couldn't see earrings. So it was common for them to put rings in their noses and these bracelets. Okay. So this is a gift that was given by the servant. And then we have a conversation. And he said, whose daughter are you? Please tell me if there is a place in your father's house for us to spend the night. So he's asking, and he's also, he needs a place to stay that night. And she says to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. So Rebecca is telling him who she is. And she said to him, yes, there is straw. And yes, plenty of feed. And yes, a place to spend the night. You see how gracious she's being? She's making it very certain how welcome, to welcome him. And they have everything that is needed for them to stay. And this did it. This did it for the servant and the men. So let's see how they respond. And let's see in verse, in the next verse, 26. The men knelt down and worshiped Yahweh. And he said, the servant said, "Blessed be Yahweh, the God of my Lord Abraham, for who has not forsaken his covenant faithfulness and his truthfulness toward my Lord. As for me, Yahweh has guided me on the way to the house of my Lord's relatives." So they are very excited. The deal was done. The prayer was answered. It's very clear. The girl is beautiful. She's hospitable. She's generous. And off they go. Then the girl ran. So they get to the place where they're going. She ran to her mother's house about these things. And it's pretty common in the East, I found out, that women had their own quarters. If they had large tents, then they'd have a place for the women, and the men would be in any other area. And if sometimes they would have more tents, and the woman would have their own tents. And it makes sense that the girl, who's very excited now, she's done this wonderful thing, and here she's been given gold and bracelets, and here we go. So she goes to her mother's house about these things. She's going to talk it over with mom. That's just the same way our kids would do the same thing today if something like that happened. Now, Rebecca had a brother, and his name was Laban. And Laban's quite a character. We don't see how much of a character he is right now, but believe me, in the coming chapters, we're going to see how he deals with Jacob, and he's quite the guy. So Laban ran out of the house to the spring. So anyhow, he went to the spring, and when he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's hand, and when he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, saying, "This is what the man said to me," and he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. So the brother goes out, and it's kind of interesting. We're going to see that Bethuel, her dad, he's going to show up later, but he's not here right now. So we don't know what the deal is, if he's out working or if he's ill or very old. We don't know. But her brother is getting very much involved with what's going on. And in verse 31, and she said, "Come," and he said, this is Laban saying, "Come, O blessed of Yahweh, why are you standing outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." So he's also inviting the servant, Abraham's senior servant, and the men. So let's go a little bit, just see, let's see where I am. You got to check my notes here. Yeah. When food was set before him, so they're getting ready for a meal, he said, "I will not eat until I've stated my business." And so Laban says, "Speak." So he's going to go into this talk to make sure everything is clear. And so let's just go back. We're going to take a pause here and go back with some history here, some background. So we know that Abraham's house is where he sent the servant to get a wife for Isaac. We know where they live now. His father, Abraham's father, was Terah, and he had 3 sons, Haran, Nahor, and Abraham. Now, Nahor married his niece, Milcah. As we mentioned before, she was Haran's daughter. That was common back then. We kind of today, we go, ooh, but then it was okay. Later on, God tells people that we're going to have to change things as history goes and different genetic mutations start showing up. It's not a good idea to marry close relatives. So one of Milcah's sons was Bethuel. And Rebecca, so that makes, and that's Rebecca's dad. So Rebecca was, if you can follow this, sometimes I have a hard time following. Rebecca was Abraham's great niece, as well as his great great niece through her father, Bethuel. So she fit the criteria of being a relative. And we don't know her mother's name for whatever reason, but she was alive. We know that much. She went to see her mom, and later on she gets some gifts. So Rebecca qualified with Abraham's request because she was at his father's house. So we'll continue now. We'll get back into the scripture. Verse 34. So he said, "I am Abraham's servant." This is the senior servant speaking to Laban and whoever else is there. Yahweh has blessed my Lord abundantly. Yes, he has. And he has become great. He has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and male slaves and female slaves and camels and donkeys. Sarah, my Lord's wife, bore a son to my Lord when she was old, and Abraham, has given all that he has to him. Isaac is the heir. Now, later on, we're going to see next week that Abraham had another wife who had several sons, and they were given gifts, but the inheritance went to Isaac. Verse 37. My Lord made me swear. Remember that oath in the thigh saying, you are not to take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live. That's where Abraham was, in Canaan. But you are to go to my father's house and to my clan and take a wife for your son, for my son. So we talked about this oath, and oaths. I want to take a little bit of background here and talk about oaths and what they mean. Let me finish out this particular section before I go on to that. I said to my Lord, what if the woman will not follow me? He's just rehearsing what he talked to Abraham. We just read about it. And Abraham, said to me, Yahweh, before whom I have walked, will send an angel with you and make your journey a success, so that you will take a wife for my son, from my clan, and from my father's house. Then will you be free of your oath. Now, see, this is what I want to talk about. When you make an oath, it was a big deal. And if you broke an oath, a curse would follow. This is pretty common. We've seen this in other places. Let's take a look into Deuteronomy. I didn't set this up, but in Deuteronomy, let me stop sharing for a moment. And I'm going to open up something here. Hold on just a second, bear with me. And we're going to go to Deuteronomy. If you're getting ready, we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 28. And we're going to look at a few verses here. Okay. And I'll start sharing again. So we're in Deuteronomy chapter 28. And there's quite a few verses, but we're just going to get the feel of it here. And this is not new to you, because we've gone through this stuff before, talking about curses. And so we're going to look in Deuteronomy. I'll pop back on me here. So Deuteronomy chapter 28. And in verse 15. But if you will not listen to the voice of Yahweh your God by being careful to do all his commandments and his statutes that I command you this day, all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. And then he lists all of them. Curse in the city, curse in the field, your basket, your kneading bowl, fruit of your womb, whole bunch of curses. Why? Because they took an oath, made a covenant, took an oath. I know that part. And so it's a big deal if you're going to make an oath. And so the senior servant here wanted to make sure what was going on, and that what are the conditions of the oath. I want to take another look here. We're going to take a look at another thing about curses. And curses they haven't been studied too much, but it's a good study on curses. People, we know about different records in the Bible, Balaam and in that era, and then the cursing of Israel, which that wouldn't happen. He finally decided not to do it. He had to turn down a lot of money, but he finally got to his senses and said, it's not worth it. And so he wouldn't curse them. And it's a big deal. So it's not like, oh, that's so what? In Proverbs, it says, now this is what it talks about fluttering. You don't have to worry about curses like a fretting bird or a flying swallow. So too is an undeserved curse fails to arrive. So if it's undeserved, if somebody wants to curse you, I know this sounds a little bizarre, but it won't. If it's undeserved, no sweat. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, let's go back to Genesis 24 and we'll go down to 42. So he's talking about the oath. He just said that, I'll finish that verse out. Then will you be free from my oath? Or when you come to my clan, if they do not give her to you, you will be free from my oath. So that was the conditions he made clear with Abraham before he made the oath. And I came today, the senior servant is saying, I came today to the spring and said, "Oh Yahweh, the God of my Lord Abraham, if now you are making the journey on which I'm going successful, behold, as I'm standing by the spring of water, let the young woman who comes out to draw the water, to whom I say, please give me a little water to drink from the jug, and she says, drink, and I will also draw for the camels, let her be the woman whom Yahweh has appointed to be my Lord's son, be for my Lord's son." So he's telling them all that's going on. He wants to be very clear. And before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her jug on her shoulder. She went down to the spring, drew the water. I said to her, please give me a drink. And she quickly let down her jug from her shoulder and said, drink. And I will also give water to your camels. So I drank. And she also gave water to the camels. So pretty good recall here. And he's going through it bit by bit so they understand what's going on. Then I asked her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. And I kneeled down and worshiped Yahweh and blessed Yahweh, the God of my Lord Abraham, who had led me in a true way to take my Lord's brother's daughter for his son. So he rehearses the whole thing, very clear. He recalls the details very accurately. Verse 49. Now, if you will act with covenant faithfulness and truthfulness towards my Lord, tell me. If not, tell me, so I may turn to the right hand or the left. So then Laban, now we have Bethuel showing up on the scene here. But Laban is coming out first, it seems that he's being the spokesman. Then Laban and Bethuel answered, the thing has come from Yahweh. We cannot speak to you bad or good. He says it's obviously clear. This is from God. This is from Yahweh. Everything you told us, we get it. It's of God. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go. Let her be the wife of your Lord's son, as Yahweh has spoken. This is a wonderful way these men are responding, her brother and her dad. And just a real beautiful section of trust and believing and answer to prayer and being honest with other people. I love the honesty and the detail of the honesty and how they received it. Just a wonderful record. And when Abraham's servant, we'll go on here in verse 52. And when Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed on the ground before Yahweh. And the servant brought out articles of silver. This is stuff that he would have brought with him. Silver and articles of gold and clothing, and he gave them to Rebekah. He also gave valuable presents to her brother and her mother. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. So he's giving gifts. So Abraham is a wealthy person. He's bringing gifts to Rebekah and her brother and mother. And he said, and the men who were with him, they ate. So finally, he got this all off the table, so to speak. He said he wasn't going to eat till he got this cleared up. So he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. And they rose up in the morning, and he said, send me away, my Lord. This was a common thing where they would ask permission to leave. And so he said, send me away. And so we're in verse 55 now. But her brother, that's Laban, And her mother said, let the young girl stay with us a few days, at least 10. After that, she will go. And he said, do not delay me, for Yahweh has made my journey successful. Send me away that I may go my way, go to my Lord. And they said, we will call the young girl and ask for an answer from her own mouth. So they wanted them to stick around for 10 days. And the servant said, nah, I got to go. And so they go to Rebecca. Isn't this amazing? You know, they don't just overrule her heart, her thoughts, her desires. They ask her. And then they call Rebecca and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. So they sent Rebecca, their sister, Laban's sister, with the one who had nursed. Okay, so a person who had nursed Rebecca when she was a baby and raised her, and Abraham's servant and his men, they all went together. So we're going to see that she had some other people come with them too. But this woman and this was not uncommon, wet nursing. And even as near as my wife's mother's mother had been wet nursed. It was not common where the mother would not breastfeed the child, but she would have a servant or someone who worked in the house to do the nursing. And this person would raise the child. And nursing, they went longer back then. It wasn't 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It could be a couple years, even longer. And so she had a real connection with Rebecca and raised her. She was very involved with her raising. And so this woman, and later on, we're going to find out this woman name is Deborah. This is going to show up. Let's take a look at that right now. We'll go over to Genesis 35. And in Genesis 35, we'll see about her. And in verse 8. 35:8. Okay. And Deborah, the one who nursed and raised Rebekah, died. So this is the time of her death. This is sometime after what we're talking now. And she was married in Bethel under the oak. So it was named Alon Bacchus. So that's how we know her name was Rebecca. Deborah. So back to Genesis 24. And in verse 58. So then they called Rebecca and said to her, will you go with the man? And she said, I will go. I read that. So they sent Rebecca and her sister and the person we read this to, and Abraham's servant and his men. So off they go. They blessed Rebecca and said to her, our sister may become thousands of 10,000s, and may your seed possess the gate of all those who hate you. So they say this little goodbye blessing, and there she goes. So Rebecca arose with her young women. So that's why we know it was more than just Deborah. And they rode on the camels. So we talked about that earlier. There's 10 camels. And followed the man. And this would be the servant. So the servant took Rebecca away. So they're heading back to Abraham and Isaac. Now, let me check my notes. Here we go. Yeah, we're doing good. Now, Isaac had come from Beer Lahai Roi, for he was living in the land of the Negev. And we all know where the Negev is. That's way down south, right? We're getting really close to Egypt. The dry area down there. And so that's where he headed. Isaac went out for a stroll. Can you believe that? We do that. In the field in the evening, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there were camels coming. And so Rebecca lifted up her eyes and saw Isaac, and she got on off the camel. So she's very respectful. And I'm not certain she knew it was Isaac, the guy that she was going to be married to. Maybe she did. But yeah, she saw Isaac and got off the camel. And she said to the servant, who is this man walking to meet us? So she didn't know him. The servant said, it is my Lord. So she took her veil and covered herself. Now, this is interesting because this is not common that women would veil themselves in this time in this period for these kinds of people. But sometimes the understanding is that the study is that if a young woman was meeting her husband for the first time, future husband, she could wear a veil. And that wasn't common. The Muslims made that common. Now, the Egyptians and the Syrians and the Greek and the Roman world did not. You can take a look at their statues, and this will bear them out. They're not, the women aren't wearing veils. Okay. And she said to the servant, and well, I just read that, and she took the veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all these things that he had done. And so now he gets the story of what happened at the well, the prayer, the response, and who he met, and Laban and Rebekah, and all this stuff. So he rehearses it so God doesn't have to say it all again. And then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother. So he is taking her to be his wife. Now, we know in New Testament times, weddings were a big deal, big celebration. But throughout the history of the Old Testament, there was a variety of ways they did it. They weren't always a big deal. And sometimes it was just an agreement. And it looks like that's what occurred here, unless a lot of stuff has been left out. He's taking her into his mother's tent. So that means they're married, in their opinion. He took Rebekah and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So a wonderful record here. And of Rebekah, and we see the heart of Rebekah and the wonderful character she had, and all the godly things that occurred that she would be chosen. So it's a wonderful record. And next week, we're going to get into Genesis 25. We're going to learn about Abraham's other wife after Sarah died. And we're going to go through the death of Abraham next week. We're going to talk about Ishmael. And we know that was his first son through Hagar. And we're going to talk about the birth of Jacob and Esau. And we're going to talk about selling his birthright. So it's going to be a very interesting one next week. Lots of interesting stories, and it'll be a real blessing. So Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus Christ, thank you for this time together. Thank you for the word that just the wonderfulness of your word, how it's always a blessing, how we learn so much, how as the closer we look and as we ask you to show us this stuff, these little lessons of life, and how you work so wonderfully in situations and can work those ways in our lives too, and do. So we thank you for this night. We ask you for a wonderful night's sleep, good rest, a great weekend coming up, and thank you for protecting us and all the things that you do so much for us that we don't even know about. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. So I'll stop recording.